Welcome to Your Intended Message, the perfect place for leaders and promising professionals who want to convey the intended message for greater success. Every week, we interview experts who can help you communicate more effectively, whether that's one-to-one, one-to-few, or one-to-many. And perhaps the most important conversation, one-to-self. I'm your host, George Torok. My guest today is Irvine Nugent. Here's 3 facts I think you should know about Irvine. 1, his mission is to help leaders harness the power of their emotions so they can make deeper connections to have greater influence. 2, he is the author of the book, Leadership Lessons from the Pub. It must have been a delight writing that book, doing all that research. And 3, he was born in Northern Ireland, and he's lived in the U.S. for more than 30 years now. Irvine Nugent, welcome to Your Intended Message.
George, thank you. Thank you for the invitation to be part of it. I'm excited.
I'm delighted to be talking with you and only wishing that we could have been doing this in an Irish pub.
Amen to that. Indeed. That would make it a lot more fun.
Irvine, you are a specialist in emotional intelligence, and that's a term that's been made popular by Daniel Goleman. And there are a lot of people who think they know what emotional intelligence is. How do you describe emotional intelligence, and in particular in terms that people can immediately grasp it and go, aha, I get it?
Well, George, emotional intelligence, as you say, is an interesting term, and it is a catch-all term that's really not that precise because people think of it in different ways. How I like to describe it and define it is that people with high emotional intelligence are able to do 4 things very well. The first thing they're able to do is they're able to be aware of their own emotional life. They know what's happening when they are triggered emotionally. They can feel it in their body. They can sense that within themselves. And then the second thing that they're able to do when they know that's happened, they have a set of tools that they can reach into, and they can manage those emotions to the best outcome that they want. Third thing they're able to do is they're able to recognize what's happening in others, the emotions that are happening in others, recognizing the tone of a room, feel that when they enter it. And then the fourth thing is to use all that information to manage the relationship that they're in so that relationship has a positive outcome.
Are you suggesting that people who with high emotional intelligence are more in control of their emotions?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think they are more aware of their emotions. I think they have greater ability to manage those emotions. But just like anything, George, we are tired or we turn up, etc. In the moment, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have this ability in the spot. We can get triggered as well. We can lose our control, etc. But people with high emotional intelligence are normally more self-aware and have more tools to manage their emotions.
So what a person with high emotional intelligence, when they're in a conflict with another person, are they able to kind of step outside of themselves and saying, hey, George, don't let what he says make you angry again like last time? Is that kind of a conversation going on?
Absolutely, yes. So first of all, people with high emotional intelligence are aware of their own, what I like to call their conflict story, because they know if they're conflict avoidant or they're not. And so they're able to sense, oh, you know what, I'm absolutely stepping back when I actually should be stepping forward into this. Second thing is they know their trigger. I use a term which is called the trigger print. Just as we have a fingerprint, we also have a trigger print. And so it's unique to each of us. And so say, for example, someone has said something, done something that's triggered you emotionally. You're aware of that. And all of a sudden you can maybe feel the feelings of anger, feeling hot, feeling your fists beginning to clench. And then you say, okay, I'm getting angry here. What do I need to do to remain engaged? Or maybe the solution is, you know what, I just need to step back and breathe, or maybe step out, because this conversation is not going in a healthy way.
In your experience, is anger the most destructive emotion?
You know, I'm on a mission to rehabilitate the gift of anger, because, and I call it a gift of anger. Every one of our emotions serves a purpose, and anger serves a purpose as well. And the purpose of anger is it develops really as a sign that something's gone in the way. There are barriers in our way, and we're angry. So anger can be destructive. And the problem with anger, of course, is it can lead to a downward cycle. And so, in other words, you're angry at me, and then I see that, I become angry with you, you become more angry. So there's the potential is there. However, anger also can be used for good. Look at all the social movements in the world today. Look at the advances. All of that began with an anger because people were putting barriers in front of people for whatever reason. And so that righteous anger, as I like to say, impelled people to act.
So I'm reminded of the line from, and I don't remember what the movie was, I'm angry as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And anger is a sign. And hopefully people with high emotional intelligence say, okay, I'm triggered. I'm angry. What is it? What has got in the way? And when you explore that, maybe not quite in the moment, but when you take time to explore that, you can go beneath the surface. And what you'll normally find is a value or something important that has been violated, something that has absolutely got you angry. And so you're able then to think about it in a way and evaluate what's gone on.
This ability to recognize our own emotions and recognize the triggers. Are we born with that, or do we have to take a course, or is there something we eat or drink, or what can we do to get better at this?
You know, so I think in my experience, I found some people are more, I don't know if it's quite innate, but some people are more self-reflective, grew up more self-reflected than others. The great thing about emotional intelligence is this: you can be 16, you can be 96, and it is an opportunity to grow each day. Emotional intelligence is not fixed. It's not a fixed trait. And so it can expand, but it also can diminish. And as we go on, what we want to try and do, of course, is to grow in our self-awareness and our self-management skills and an awareness of others. And for me, that's a key to great leadership as well.
I've heard it said that the young and the elderly have no filters. And is that a sign of a lack of emotional intelligence, or is it like certainly with the young, I can imagine, but what about the elderly?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's part, for the young, it's part of growing up. It's part of their psychological development and also the brain chemistry. But for older people, you know, I think part of it, I think, in my experience of working with some older clients, is that you get to the stage where, you know what, I have become to a situation in my life where, for want of a better word, I don't care anymore. I'm not trying to protect that which I thought was important. Impression management is not that important. I don't really care what you think about me. So I do think with some older people, there is a kind of a letting go and being able to express things in a way. Now, you still got to express them in an emotionally intelligent way, because that's not necessarily always going to lead to constructive relationships.
How can you recognize the lack of emotional intelligence in people around you, especially if they work for you or work with you?
Well, I think there's a few things. Number one is, I think you become aware with noticing how unaware they are of some of their emotions. So say, for example, someone around you gets very angry, makes a comment or something, and is totally unaware of its impact in the room. Also, people who have very poor ability to read others. They don't sense what's happening. They don't sense the emotion of others, and they're not able to modulate that. They're not able to take that into their frame of reference and modulate. And then the other thing I would say is what I like to call their emotional lexicon is very narrow. And so if you ask them, how are you feeling? They don't have a lot of ability to grab different nuances about their emotional life. So I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm angry, and that's it. Whereas you'll know a really emotionally intelligent person, they've nuances about that. I'm elated or I'm miffed. They have different words for it to express intensity of what they're feeling and are able to modulate that for less intensity or more intensity.
In a team building mode, what can the leader do to enhance the emotional intelligence of the team, especially during these times of the pandemic?
So I think there are a number of key skills that I think are important, especially when it comes to team building. I think the first one is our ability to listen. And so very often we're really not listening. We're listening with the intent to respond rather than truly listening to the other person. So I think there are some great team building exercises around, what are my listening barriers? How might I listen better? Am I truly listening to others? Taking some time as well just to check in with each other. What I've noticed virtually is there are the opportunities, say, of meeting in the water cooler or having these casual conversations are gone. And now it's like, I'm on my Zoom call. Okay, let's get to business. Okay, we're off. And so we've lost some of these really casual conversations, which are actually quite critical because they give us information about what's going on at home. How are you feeling? What's happening? And these casual conversations give us critical information. And so I would just say for a leader, can we in some way create space where people are able to check in, have conversations? Because there's one thing we know what's happened now virtually in COVID is that everyone's experience is totally different and how they're experiencing it is totally different.
When you see a colleague who appears to be suffering more than others, how can you help them, reach out to them without overstepping your bounds?
Yeah, it's a great question, George. Because first of all, sadness is an emotion shows in the face, and so when we see, the drooping lips, the eyebrows, inner eyebrows up, it communicates to us something of sadness. Now, just because a person shows us sadness, we have to be careful. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're ready to share that. And so I think what we've got to do is we've got to kind of assess. So I think the first thing I would just say is just check in with them. Just say, hey, maybe it's just me, but I've noticed that something is bothering you. Is that correct? Or something? I just wanted to check in that everything's okay, and leave it there and let them come back to you and signal, I don't want to talk about it. I do want to talk about it. And if they don't, just say, I'm always here if you need a sounding board or someone to listen to.
I'm curious, in your book is entitled Leadership Lessons from the Pub. What lessons of leadership stood out for you most from the pub?
The book came from many years of being an executive coach. And the thing that I kept hearing time and time again in that coaching session was, how do I engage employees? How do I stop turnover? How do I create a culture that people want to be in? And the more I thought about that, the more I thought about my childhood. I grew up in a pub. And then the more I thought about that is, here you have this institution, hundreds of years old, where people voluntarily go to. They call it their local. They go there, and more than that, they're vulnerable. They don't feel they have to be these perfect people. They tell their war stories. They tell what's happening in their life. They laugh, they cry, and they have fun. And so the more I thought about this, I said, what a wonderful image and metaphor for the workplace that we want. And so how does that achieved in a pub? Well, it's really achieved through barmen, bar women, owners who have really high emotional intelligence, who are able to come in and have conversations with everyone who walks in. They're able to create this space where people feel they want to belong to, they're included. If you go to a pub in Ireland and you're by yourself and you're sitting down, you better be prepared, because within at least 15 minutes, someone is going to plant a seat next to you and start talking to you. Now, you may think, oh, this person's trying to be nosy, but it's really not. What good pubs do is they widen the circle and they bring people in, and you're part of it. You're part of this community, because it really is a community. And so the book was born of that, was born of these lessons, I think, that can really teach leaders and give inspiration to leaders to create spaces where people want to belong to, which are more human.
Can you identify a time or point in your life when emotional intelligence suddenly became important and valuable to you?
I think one of the big lessons for me actually was a huge awakening to my lack of emotional intelligence. And that was, I'd taken over a job position as CEO of a local branch of Catholic Charities. There was a big meeting with the board. There were a lot of problems to do with finances, as a normal nonprofit deals with. I walk in, and the board, which were wonderful in the interview, now were all turned looking at me. I'd made a few rookie mistakes, try to change things too quickly, which I learned that lesson. And all of a sudden, boom, it was like every single arrow was pointed at me, and I was triggered and I shut down. I hardly say a thing during the meeting. And I was so emotionally triggered, I actually walked out of the meeting, went to the bathroom and threw up. That's how triggered I was. And so luckily, the week afterwards, I had to go to Ireland to a wedding. So it was a great release and to go away. But, the more I thought about that situation, I said, wow, that's awful. I mean, I showed no leadership there. I shut down. I wasn't able to deal with the situation in the moment. And for me, it was just an awakening that I need to change that. I need to become more self-aware. And for me, it was an awakening about, I don't like conflict. And so when people come at me, I shut down and I said, oh, okay, well, that's hardly surprising knowing my childhood, but I need to change that, because conflict is part of life and it's certainly part of leadership.
You mentioned your childhood in Ireland, and at one time was known for conflict. How much of an impact did that conflict have on your character, your emotional intelligence, and where you went from there?
Yeah, I think I've come to appreciate it more as I've got older. But I am a child of the Troubles. That's what we call my generation. I was born the year they started. At the age of 6, my family lost our home and our pub in a terrorist bombing. And so we were deeply impacted. And I think it placed in my heart, I can remember always saying, is this all we have? Are we just destined for a breakdown in society? Or can in some way we build trust? Can we build bridges, not walls? And I think so that really has inspired me. And I think as I look back at my life up to this point, everything that I've done comes as a response to that. And certainly the work that I do at the moment are there ways that I can help people make emotional connections so that, conflict is inevitable, but it doesn't have to be destructive.
What are the ways that a person who is emotionally intelligent, a high emotional intelligence, what ways might they deal with conflict? because it's part of life, everyday life?
Great question. So I would say, first of all, I think I just said a little bit earlier as well, they're able to realize their own conflict story. So they know whenever they're pushing back or not. Sometimes when it comes to conflict, sometimes we need to stay connected. We need to be in there and have a conversation and not withdraw. Sometimes we just need to withdraw a little bit. Things need to cool down, and then we have to have a conversation. But then when it comes to the actual conflict conversation, what I think a really person with high emotional intelligence is able to do is that they are able to, first of all, pre-conversation, realize what are some of the emotions that might be happening in this conversation? What are some of the triggers that could happen to me? And so they're able to prepare a little bit. Oh, you know what? I think they might say this, and that's going to make me angry. So what am I going to do then? And then in the midst of the conversation, when they feel the physiological things happening in their body, when they feel they have been triggered, they're able to insert little things. Like one of the things I teach leaders is a 7-second reset, which is just a very simple, brief stop where we're able to refocus, recenter, breathe in, breathe out, adjust our bodies so that we're really in real time making some adjustments. And that's what emotional intelligent people can do. They can make these adjustments. They can sense if their voice is getting louder. And so they're able to act as a calming force. Instead of what I talked about, the danger of anger is that I can go in a downward spiral. So preventing that happening as well and become a much more calming influence on the conversation.
I'm wondering if one of the outcomes, or maybe one of the fundamentals of emotional intelligence is having better conversations with yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes. I think, for me, the core of emotional intelligence, the foundation is always self-awareness. And self-awareness, and to realize that takes two things. I think first of all, it takes a little bit of humility, that there never comes a time when we know ourselves. There's always room for growing and expanding. So that humility. And then the second thing is an attitude of curiosity, to be curious. People with really great emotional intelligence are curious about themselves. They're curious about the situations. They make time to reflect on what's happened, and they look back and they realize, like if I get up in the morning, I'm feeling tired, I'm grumpy, I know it's going to be a difficult day for me to keep my emotions in check. So just even that humility to know that is really fantastic.
When we do get angry, how do we review that? How do we debrief after, so we might prevent it or perhaps make it more productive the next time, because there will be a next time?
So it's a great question. One of the things that I do in some of my training is I actually have people plot out the angry episode. And so I make them draw a graph, and the graph is the horizontal is the time and the vertical is the intensity. And so I say, reflect on the situation and now draw a graph of how quick were you to get anger? Was it slow building, or was it boom in a flash? And how long did the anger last? And that's the duration. And then how quick did it fall off? Was it slow or long? And so what you begin to find out, I think visually it helps us. Whoa, this is interesting. Now, if you're with your partner or with a colleague or whatever, one of the things I suggest is, well, get them to draw their experience of your anger as well. And then it becomes an interesting conversation about the anger and the experience of the anger. And what we're trying to do, George, is we're trying to, in many ways, become aware of patterns. Because as you say, it's going to happen again. And very often our anger is caused by a particular trigger, et cetera. And so we become just more aware of when it's triggered, how quick it is, et cetera. And the more knowledge we have about that, the more able we are to manage it in the moment, become more aware. Because what we're really trying to do is we're really trying to insert and manage it before we act with behaviors that we'll later regret.
For those people who perhaps want to explore their own level of emotional intelligence and maybe improve where they're at, I believe they can find a course on your site that can take them through the process. And the beauty is that you've made that course available at no charge. They can find that course, and it's on your website. Tell us your website.
So it's irvinenugent.com/gift, GIFT. And it is a free e-course which goes through the fundamentals of those 4 building blocks of emotional intelligence, and also provides you with some really neat tools that you can begin to integrate to kind of help you begin to grow and expand your emotional intelligence.
So that website is Irvine Nugent, and Irvine is IRVINE, Nugent, as in Ted, at .com/gift. Irvine, if there's 1, 2, or 3 pieces of advice you could give to a person as they start their day, their work day, to move through that day in a more positive flow, more positive direction, by tapping into their emotional intelligence, what might be those 1, 2, or 3 suggestions you suggest to people?
Okay, so first of all, I would suggest create an intention for the day. So the first thing is absolutely look forward and say, what do I want this day to be? What is my intention for the day? If everything went right in this day, what would it look like? So often we say, oh, this is going to go wrong, or that could go wrong. But I would say, what if everything went right? How would I feel? And then the second thing is transitions. Every day we have transitions from work to home and home to work. Now, with COVID, that's not quite, people are working home, but still we have a place at home, which is our office. I always say be very deliberate in making those movements. So become aware as I sign into the Zoom meeting or I go to the office, what am I carrying? What mood am I in? And then do I need to make a shift? Is this going to serve me? Is it serving the others? And then vice versa. Just say you've been in a horrible meeting, you're just aggravated. Be aware of that. And before you go into home, or before you go back into the living room or the kitchen or whatever, and maybe you say, you know what, I just need to walk for 5 minutes and just get rid of this so that I can show up the way that I need to show up at home or at work.
My guest today is Irvine Nugent, reminding you that you might want to ask yourself these questions. What is your trigger print, and are you being sure to use the 7-second reset? Irvine, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, George. An honor and a privilege.
If you like what you heard, remember to like, comment, and share this podcast. Come back every week for more practical insights to help you convey your intended message. I'm your host, George Torok.